Hi, I'm Bart Hansen. I'm the owner and lead instructor for CrushLivePoker.com. The following hand comes from our call-in show that we record at 4:45 p.m. Pacific Time every Monday. If you want to call in your hand, check out the instructions in the video description. So you got a hand
Right
for us?
on. I do, yeah. So I'm playing 1-3.
Okay.
The $500 max buy-in, effective stack is probably about 375, which is villain stack. I have him probably about doubled.
Where's this played out of, by the way?
Verona.
Verona. Okay, Indian casino, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Never been there actually, but
Oh, it's a really great room. You should check it out sometime.
okay.
They got a hella crazy 2-5 game that goes a lot.
2.5 1K cap or
15.
Oh wow, that's not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Cool.
Okay, so villain is probably upper middle age. I'd say like late 50s-ish.
Okay.
And seems to be reasonably tag. And seems to be one of those guys who maybe overfolds just a little bit when he's facing aggression on later streets.
Okay.
Always kind of seeing monsters under the bed. And
Okay.
I've heard him. I pay a lot of attention to table talk because I think people always think about like, you know, what they're looking like and whatever, and they don't necessarily think about the shit that's coming out of their mouth.
Yeah.
And so I've heard him comment on a few hands, like to his neighbor, if they're both not in the pot, and somebody makes a big bet on the river. Oh, he's got to have the nut spades or whatever, you know. So I've heard this from him a couple of times. He's sitting like right across the table from me, just like 2 seats over.
Okay.
So this hand, he's under the gun +1, and he raises to 11. So I'm giving him a pretty tight range. He seems to like limp his kind of weaker playable hands and raise his stronger hands.
Okay.
And it folds around to me in the big blind, and I have an ace king of hearts. And I think about 3-betting, but I just don't like that option as well. Against his tighter range, I don't feel like I stack up too well when the only hands I'm really crushing is like, I think he's going to raise with ace queen off and probably ace jack suited. But I got a lot of flips.
So in
and
this
a couple other.
So in this particular configuration, which is you what you describe as an early position raise, right, with a tight range,
Yeah.
and then just gets folded to you in the big blind. Ace king suit is obviously one of the best hands that you can have, but yes, actually, you would be surprised that this is probably call. I mean, it's probably a partial of 3-bet or call. Where this is always a slam dunk 3-bet and you're losing out is if there are calls in between. If there's one guy
absolutely.
or two guys that call, you're just getting way too much of an overlay not to 3-bet. But for some of you guys that listen to my shotgun hustler stuff, I'm doing my 5-5 challenge throughout the last, say, 6 months, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I flatted this configuration against the same type of person that you're talking about with queens in the big blind.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, you're not super deep, and then, I don't know. I mean, I know you say the guy's tight, but it still is 1-3. So you could still be losing out on some value, but it's not on the surface. It's not always a 3-bet. So you just call. Okay.
Yeah, I just flat.
Yep.
And the flop comes out king 9-3 rainbow. I do not remember the suits, but they end up not mattering because the turn turns it into like a full-on men's warehouse board. So it's king 9-3 rainbow.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so obviously I feel like we're pretty confident we have the best hand here.
Okay. Yep.
So I go ahead and check to him to play in flow, and he bets 15 into 22-ish.
Okay.
And I decided that like it would really suck to check raise him and get him to fold like ace queen because he could just be taking a continuation bet stab at the pot with a hand like that. And obviously, if I check raise, he's going to fold, and that would be a bummer. So I elect to just call his 15.
Okay, let me ask you a question real quick, and I'm not saying what you're doing is wrong necessarily, but if you do flat sometimes in the field or in the blind with ace-king and you flop top pair, usually actually with an ace is actually a little bit better, you certainly can raise the flop. My question to you is that you just said you didn't want him to have, like, fold like ace queen or something like that. Like, what if you had like pocket threes or pocket nines? Are you still just flatting if you flopped a set?
On a board this dry, maybe. It's tough because playing out of position just sucks so bad. You know, no matter what you do, you're just never going to realize full value. So I feel like you got to mix it up, you know, kind of based on your opponent. And since this guy kind of was a little scared sometimes, I figured I'd just see if maybe he had an ace on the turn and wanted to start piling in chips. Like if an ace would have come out on the turn, I'm ready to get stacks in.
Well, of course. But I'm just saying that it's not. Just sometimes people look at certain hands, they say, well, you know, I'm just going to call because I don't, you know, I want him to barrel off. That's fine. But if you're going to slow play nines and threes, that's fine too. But this could probably be sometimes raise, sometimes call. It's not draw heavy. So okay, so you make the call. Okay, let's go to the turn.
Okay, the turn is a queen. Is another just offsuit queen. Gives us a men's warehouse board, which I feel like is kind of a shitty card because obviously, like, I feel like king queen suited is probably in his range, and obviously queens is in his range. I don't feel like jack 10 is probably in his range all that much. I feel like he plays a little too tight for that. So
the board is definitely getting worse for ace king. Yes, I think we can definitely acknowledge that.
Yeah. So I decide to check to him and see what he does and kind of evaluate it from there.
Yep.
And he bets 20, and like he bets 20 into 50, basically 52.
Okay.
So that seems a little weird to me that he's basically betting 3/4 pot on flop, and then he's betting less than half pot on turn.
Well, I mean, you know what that could represent. I mean, he could have the same hand as you, and he's starting to get a little bit scared, or he could have aces. It's any hands that actually, I mean, ace king and aces. I actually think that sizing makes sense, where he's just going to bet and then take a showdown basically at the end.
That's kind of what I thought too. Yeah,
because I mean, it makes sense.
I was definitely giving him ace king and aces.
Yeah,
and I was also giving him like king queen probably.
I don't know if king queen sizes down like that. I don't think king queen really sizes down like that.
I don't either. And it's just hard to tell with this kind of player. But maybe, yeah.
I mean, as crazy as it sounds, the thing is that I mean, it would be pretty unorthodox to almost try to. I've actually seen certain situations where things have happened. I think it might have happened once or twice to me, but I've certainly seen it on Live at the Bike. I mean, this is pretty far out there where someone gets a pretty good clue that someone else has the same hand that they do, like with ace king, and then tries to move them off of ace king. Like, if you thought that this guy like had, and he wasn't going to be sizing down with king queen here, and you think he's got a lot of ace king and a lot of aces, and he'd fold, you could sometimes even raise here and try to move him off the same hand, or move him off a better. I mean, I know that seems out there on paper, and people are like, "Oh, yeah, ace king will have way too much showdown value to do that," but I don't know. I think there can certainly be some extreme range scenarios, but it sounded to me like you called. Is that right?
I did, because I thought that there was a chance I was still good and I still had some showdown value.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's also, obviously, yeah. But I'm just saying that, like, when you look at somebody's really tight up front raising range, and then you look at this bet pattern of what you had said, which was like, you know, kind of large bet on the flop, followed by sort of this incy bet on the turn, which is not consistent with the big hand. And if he's so tight from up front, there's a lot of ace king that this guy has. Now, you having ace king, of course, blocks that, right? I mean, if you have ace king, there's 2 kings left in the deck and 3 aces. There's only 6 combos. And it would suck if he's trying to reel you in, though, or something like that with pocket nines. But okay, you call.
Yeah, so I call, and part of my thought process is there's a lot of scary cards that can come on the turn for him. They're going to be way more scary for him than they are going to be for me.
Yeah.
And one of them actually comes. It's the 10 of clubs, which, given like his sort of past commentary on what hands he thinks other players have when they make a bet on the river or whatever, I really thought this was a perfect hand to a perfect opportunity to turn my top pair, top kicker hand into an absolutely stone cold bluff. I mean,
Okay,
at this
so let's
point,
go back. Let's just go back over with the people in the podcast. So this guy opens from early position. You give this whole thing where he's tight. You call flat with 375 at 1-3 effective. Ace king of hearts. Board comes out king 9-3 rainbow. You check, he bets 15, you call, turns a queen, you check, he bets 20. We just talked about what we think he has on the turn. You call, now the river's at 10. So it's king 9-3, queen 10. No flush out there. It puts a one-liner out there to a jack. Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, I can get on board with this. It seems very, very difficult for him to ever have a jack here. And if you think he
I
overfolds
agree.
and you block like pocket kings, I mean, you might get one of these things where you get like a crying call from like, I was going to say like queens or nines, but again, like that's not really indicative of that sizing on the turn. It really is hard for him to have a jack here. So
That's
again,
what I
whether
get.
you trying to get
Yeah.
him off the same hand on the turn or trying to get him off the same hand on the river, you definitely have way more jacks than he does. Now, whether he's going to fold like aces, ace king, I don't know. I mean, but I mean, I don't mind the thought, you know.
And I feel like all of his value hands that do not have a jack, he's going to check behind if I check to him.
Of course,
Um,
of course.
So I'm going to lose the pot if I check. Is kind of my feeling.
Unless he has nothing, you know. I mean, he could have ace.
Which I
Well,
don't
he
see
could have.
how he has nothing.
He could have ace queen, right? Ace
Yeah, he
queen
could
is
have
a
ace
hand
queen.
like,
I guess
you know.
that's the only hand. Yeah.
I mean, and you beat that anyways. But, you know, if you think you can move them off of like the same hand, I mean, it looks like the pot is what, 22, 52, like 92,
It's like around
95,
80.
something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, 80. Okay.
Yeah.
20, 40,
Yeah, I think
70.
it's like a
You know,
yeah.
all right. So what did you end up
80 and
doing
90,
here?
somewhere in there.
What did you end
So
up doing?
anyway, I ended up betting 60, and guy goes into the tank for probably 2 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like he's got his call cut out, and he's got his cards uncapped, and looks like he's about to throw them in, and he can't decide which one he wants to do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sweet, this is awesome. I might be getting this guy to fold like nines here, and that would be so fucking cool, you know. And he ends up saying, well, I guess you can only have ace jack here, so I'm just going to donate. And he calls with a king jack suited.
So he has king jack suited +1 with
Yep.
king jack suited. I mean, like I said, I don't mind the
It's a little
thought.
looser than
I don't mind the thought, and it's a spot that is very under sort of bluffed, or it's just people at the low stakes don't usually turn hands into bluffs, which is why a lot of times you can have some strong hands from out of position on the river where you're going to be good a fair amount of the time and have the intention of check folding on the river. And what I mean by that is that let's say I'm first to act on the river, I have a really strong hand, but you know, the board runs out in a way where I can't get called by worse. I still think I have the best hand, but when I check and my opponent bets, the only bluffs that he would have he'd have to be turning something into a bluff, which just doesn't happen. So I'm an advocate of check folding quite a bit. And that's because people just don't turn hands into bluffs. So here, you know, I would be very surprised if I was your opponent, right? And I had like aces, I would definitely give it to you, right? Or ace king, because I wouldn't, I would have figured you'd have to have turned something into a bluff here, which is really, people just don't do it. It's interesting. I mean, the turn, obviously you have the best hand, right? So he was sort of like in between, but he continued to bet with king jack. And I assumed that he was going to take a showdown at the end, but I don't mind it. I mean, I don't really mind I don't mind the play. People saying set of nine. Again, I don't know if set of nine, set of queens, like I don't know if those take those sizings really that much on the turn. But thanks for the call.
Yeah.
Hey guys, if you like what you've seen here, please click on the subscribe button and you'll get notified every time we put up a new video. And if you want to check out crushlivepoker.com for the first month free, use the code YTA200. Click on the link right there.